Today, our panel discussion is all about navigating the book selling landscape from design to sale. So if you've ever dreamed of seeing your book on bookstore shelves, like many of our authors have, or wondered what it really takes to make that happen, you are in the right place. Today, our panel of industry experts and authors will walk you through the full book selling process, from online visibility to store placement, and share the strategies that actually drive sales. So we do have an incredible lineup of speakers joining us today. If you've been here all day, these faces will be very familiar to you. So starting off with Julie Broad, she is the CEO of Book Launchers and Amazon #1 bestselling author. Julie helps nonfiction authors write books that stand out and sell, and she's the creator of the No Boring Books method and host of the YouTube channel Book Launchers, which has excellent content and more than 70,000 subscribers. So definitely check her out there. Next, we have Stephanie Watterson. She's the editor and founder of Content Authoring and Editing Services. Stephanie brings deep expertise in editing, from sensitivity reading to developmental editing, helping authors strengthen their manuscripts and professionalism. You will be familiar with Tim Lindsay, of course, the founder and CEO of Tellwell Publishing and author of the recently launched Call to Authorship book. Since launching Tellwell in 2015, Tim and his team have helped more than 6,000 authors transform their ideas into published works and share their stories with the world. And finally, you all know the lovely Alyssa, who has been doing an incredible job hosting the Empowered Author Summit. Alyssa is Tellwell's content creator and the host of Tellwell's Demystifying Self-Publishing podcast. We've shown clips of that throughout the day. She's also the host of our YouTube channel. Alyssa is also a self-published author of the children's book, Kenny Gets Her Crown, inspired by the true story of her beautiful daughter, Kenny. So thank you all for being here today. Please welcome our guests by showing some love in the chat and the emotions. And please do introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're streaming from. It's really nice to see all the worldwide representation that we have in the chat. And if you do have questions, we'll be reserving the last few minutes for Q&A at the end. So just drop that using the Q&A function. Okay, so jumping right in, the focus is on book selling. With a lot of people, especially self-published authors, think of that. They think about getting their books stocked into physical bookstores. So we'll start there. That's definitely a question that we get a lot asked about. So Julie, just starting with you, since you've helped countless authors navigate the distribution and sales process, firstly, what should authors understand about how bookstores actually buy books?
Yeah, thank you. And it's amazing to see some of the same people still here all day. So
Yes.
you've got some dedicated folks. That's awesome.
Mhm.
And you guys still look fresh. So congrats. I want to kind of take a short step back and also just mention that when you're thinking of bookstores, I think as a self-published author, it's important to look at the math, because I think once a lot of authors understand the math, you may not really want bookstore distribution, at least not the physical step of bookstore distribution, because everybody can have distribution through Ingram Spark. You can get your book listed on whatever, North American bookstore website that you want, Indigo, Chapters, Barnes and Noble, all Books A Million. Going through Ingram, you'll get it listed there. But if you want that physical bookstore distribution, you're going to have to give them a wholesale discount of 55% in the Ingram database, which when you start doing the math means you might make $1.29, $1.40. It's not pretty on your book. So, and then when you factor in returns, which I won't go down the rabbit hole unless you guys want to go down that rabbit hole, but once you factor in returns, which happen more frequently with bookstores than any other distribution channel, you can find yourself in the hole with bookstore distributions. So it has to be a pretty important step. But Ingram Spark, you can get the distribution through Ingram Spark.
Definitely. So not everybody might be familiar with that process of the wholesale versus the consignment process. So just thinking, considering self-published authors, which is the majority of our audience here, can you walk us through the differences between those two different processes when it comes to getting your book stocked into physical bookstores?
Yeah, so consignment, you buy the book, you take it to the bookstore, and they'll pay you after they sell it. That's very common for independent bookstores to do that. The bigger chains generally aren't interested in that. They may or may not do it. Every store is a little different, and it does vary. But typically, independent bookstores will happily do consignment with you. But now now you've got a couple dollar check coming from this bookstore and a couple dollar check coming from this bookstore. So again, going back to the how important is it to you and your overall goals and strategy for that. So that's option one, consignment, being your own sales rep and buying the books and getting paid later. The other option is through a distributor. And, Ingram Spark is the most common and easy one for self-published authors. So, and at that point, it's a catalog, really. Like, just think of it as a catalog, and the bookstores can order from that catalog. And they do, that's their primary ordering catalog for the majority of bookstores.
Thank you for breaking that down for us. Alyssa, we'll go to you next as an indie author who has self published your children's book. I know you've been successful at getting your book into physical bookstores and Indigo as well as libraries. Can you walk us through the process that you took in order to make that happen?
Yeah, definitely. So I published my book back in 2023. It was spring of 2023. And at the time, for me, I was focused on connecting, building the connection with my audience. It's something that I started early on in the process of publishing my book. I made sure that I was, you know, online and connecting with other moms. As Monica had mentioned, my book is a children's book based on some medical uncertainties that we had with our now 4-year-old daughter, but she was very much in the early stages of infancy when I wrote this book. And building the community was the thing that first inspired me to start actually going through the journey of publishing this book. So once the community was established, then it became about accessibility. How can I get this book to more people? And for me, that was getting it into libraries, that was building cross promotion between my book, which was a very niche topic at the time, and getting it into the hands of people who needed it. So with it being focused on more of a medical and delicate kind of medically fragile, I guess, situation, I thought, where does that ideal reader reside? And of course, moms love to take their babies to libraries. They like to take them to mom and tot groups. There's, postnatal care that's required often for moms. There's physiotherapy, there's chiropractic work, different body work and elements that are required for mothers and their infants that maybe are experiencing some of these same issues. And so I started connecting with those different providers all across the region. And that included some of the local bookstores that I knew would be supportive of a local author. So I connected directly with the different indigos within my region, independent bookstores within my region. Indigo actually placed their own order for the book. And then there was, of course, the consignment route as well for some of those more indie bookstores. But a lot of it was creating my own pitch, my own little media kit that had, the ideal reader, a bit of a background about the book, a background about me. Why am I an authority on the space to be able to talk about this specific topic? And then really just putting, the boots to the ground and connecting directly with the people who worked in these different industries and clinics and bookstores.
Yeah, I love that. The Indigo is able to pick it up directly from Ingram, the distributor. And that's definitely, I think the easier path for the author, since then they don't have to kind of be their own distributor through the book consignment process. But Tim, I know you're very well informed about, the wholesale discounts that you have to provide to the book retailers if you want to go that route, just like Julie touched on. but also the returns process. I think not very many authors realize that you have to offer that 6-month return window, and sort of have those reserves in case the bookstore wants to, if the books aren't selling, then they will return those books to you. Can you just walk us through a little bit and touch on that aspect of it?
Sure. So Julia already touched on it, which is anybody who's self-publishing a book can publish through usually Ingram Spark. And Ingram Spark is part of Ingram, and Ingram is a long-standing American huge international distributor that operates out of the US and UK and Australia. But they have print on demand, and that's integrated right into sales channels. So anyone with an Ingram account, which is all these thousands and thousands of bookstores who sell online, but it also includes physical retailers, they basically just have Ingram accounts, which means they can search a book in their computer and they can find yours. But as an author, you have to decide if you're going to discount your book. What is it now? 40%. Sort of shifted to 40%, or you have to discount it even more to at least 55%. 55% is what physical bookstores are going to want. And like Julie said, then you have to make it returnable. And that means if your book sells, then up to, I think from whenever you take it as no longer returnable, 6 months after that. That's what it used to be. So Julie touched on losing money, and that's right, because one thing you have to be careful is how you price the book. You want to price the book at least high enough so that you're earning enough when the book sells to bookstores, so that if they return, in the industry, like 25, 30% in the traditional publishing, I think is very normal, but you want to make sure that you're earning enough so that if half the books get returned, you're still breaking even, something like that. So that's something extra you have to think about. And I haven't played around with it recently. Maybe Julie knows, but there can also be, I guess one question is, can you publish through KDP for, say, one of your books and then have a smaller discount while also publishing through Ingram Spark with a returnable? And I'd have to ask our team, but I'm not sure if that's, it seems off the top of my head that probably there might be a workaround where you could do a little bit of both and still sell most of your books through Amazon using KDP and then also have your book returnable. So there may be some savvier options there.
I can quickly touch on that. So the KDP, you never do expanded distribution for KDP, only use KDP to go to Amazon. And then there is no wholesale discount with KDP Amazon. So you just go there, sell on Amazon, and you're going to make the most money over there anyways. And then for the bookstores, it's the decision of, do I want the physical distribution or not? And one tip is, if you're not planning bookstores for your launch, because most authors do the biggest push kind of pre-launch and launch. What we do with our clients is we don't change the wholesale discount until after it's launched. So we'll leave it at the minimum, which I believe you're right is 40%. We leave it at the minimum, and then we change it after launch so that it goes to 55% if they're going to do physical bookstore distribution. And then you can't reach out to the bookstore until it's been changed for 30 days because it takes time for their catalogs to populate. But, it gives you a second kind of push, right? You do your launch push, and then you can do a bookstore push 60, 90 days later and have made maximum profit on launch.
Perfect. And so just talking for a little bit about the book goals next, for authors that are perhaps on their first or second book, and are self-published and they have a small but growing following, what would a realistic book selling goal be? Who would like to take that one?
I can kind of jump in a little bit about that. I think for me, because my book has only been out for about a year and a half, I would say take the successes where you can get them. To say that, like, even if you sell one copy, it's still selling a copy. And like, I recognize that we all have different metrics we want to hit, but I believe that, like, if you're selling a copy of a book, you're selling a copy of a book. And it's also recognizing that not everybody will take a paid copy of a book. In my case, I found that Septipus actually took off when I went to a local library and they didn't purchase a copy of a book. They had me hosting an event, and that's where most of that interest came to play. So like I say, like you have to take your successes where you can take them, understanding that like there may be some metrics you want to hit, but knowing that there's a little bit of flexibility with that, I would say take your wins where you can get them. And that could be, doing something with a not-for-profit and doing a read-along, or doing something with a library and doing an event there, or connecting with other like-minded people in the community so then they can filter that story out instead of feeling like, well, gee, I've only sold 2 books this month, but I filled myself up on this outreach and the satiation of the experience,
And
which is sometimes more meaningful than just the metric at the end of the day.
the stats are sobering. I think it's over 2 million books published in a year. Forget exactly. I think it's like 500 traditionally, and maybe it's over 2 million self-published, or 1.5. Most books, the average is like maybe $100. I forget exactly what the stats are, but most books don't sell more than a couple of hundred. So that said, you can do more, but then also in terms of making money from a book, often the savvy way to do that is to build a mix of revenue streams related to the book, so that your book is promoting your course and your services, it's generating leads, and so you're also learning a heck of a lot while you're publishing a book. You're learning storytelling, you're getting credibility, you're getting smarter, you're building skills that go beyond that. But don't quit your day job if you're a first-time author. That's what we told Lamar Jackson after he signed his $260 million contract. He's like, I want to get out of football. I just want to do my kid's book. No, just kidding. But yeah, it's a hard way to, if you're motivated just by money alone from book sales, there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of competition. You got to really be unique. So usually over time, if you can find a way to leverage the book into other revenue streams, and if you're motivated by, if you're motivated by, like Stephanie said, the huge impact you can have on a smaller number of people as well, those factor into your decision to what to invest.
And so that brings us to the best strategies that authors can use to build their brand, their books' visibility and discoverability. And Lacey chatted about that earlier today. We often tell authors that they can have the best book, but if nobody knows about it, then it doesn't matter how great they are. And so what are some effective strategies that are actually driving book sales? Who would like to take that one?
I could touch on it a little bit before Julie, if she's okay with that. I think the thing that like I keep coming back to is like know your audience, know who your demographic is. In my case, Subject was really aligned with communities that were either supporting disabilities or had disabilities, but also dealing with communities that like wanted a unique story to bring to light. And knowing your audience, like knowing, you wouldn't pitch a children's book to a bunch of people doing PhDs. Knowing where things stand is a lot easier than trying to fit something that doesn't work. And then very lastly, just within that, like the best benefits or the best way to promote any story is by word of mouth. I think that's the one thing that I'm always surprised at, is especially being, in my case, I'm on Vancouver Island, and when people find out I've written a book, they want to share it with other people, and therefore they share it with other people. So I would say that is also part of it, but it's also like creating that environment where your book is going to thrive, and that book is going to be supporting or connecting with that audience. Julie, if you want to jump in.
Yeah. I mean, it ties into what you said and what Alyssa was saying earlier, which was, it's really, I'm from a real estate background. So OPM, other people's money, it's OPA for books. It's other people's audiences. So where is your reader hanging out? And get yourself in front of that audience in some capacity. And that is huge. A lot of people say to me, I don't want to do social media. Like, great. Just get out there and meet some people who have your reader in their audience and collaborate so that you guys can, you can get in front of them and create a win for them to showcase you, your book, your content, whatever it is. And that is like the fastest and most powerful way to get your books in your readers' hands.
Perfect. Melissa, did you want to add your thoughts to that as well?
Yeah, just one last thought on that, as I kind of alluded to in my initial answer, was making people feel invested in your work. I think finding the community that you connect with and then continuing to nurture that community. For me, that was hopping on Instagram Live and sharing the cover options of my book. It was showing different things and using a poll and having people vote on the cover that resonated with them the most. It was getting people involved at every part of the publishing process in that way and sharing behind the scenes, getting their input, their feedback that allowed for them to feel invested in the work that I was producing and therefore more engaged and more willing to support it when it finally came out. So I think it just ties into that idea of knowing who your audience is and not just building a one way street of communication, but having that back and forth engagement as well.
Love that. Thank you. And Julie, you were saying, it's there's so many social media platforms, you don't have to do them all, kind of choose the ones that work for you. We do get a lot of questions on the subject of platforms. There's so many now. People don't really know like which platform they should focus on. I know I've said for myself, like I love Goodreads. I get all my recommendations from TikTok these days. And of course, that's not going to be for everybody, but maybe the panelists here can share, which platforms do they hang out in and where have they found traction in terms of driving book sales?
Yeah, I mean, I answered this morning and said the best platform is always going to be the one that you enjoy
Hmm.
because it's sustainable. And for me, it's YouTube. Like that's where I'll be hanging out the most, and that's where I connect with a lot of my readers. And then, I think the other, and it's not social media related, but I think it's not emphasized enough, and that's meeting your readers in person. Because once you meet them in person, you have this incredible bond. I even got a thank you card from somebody yesterday. I was at an event and she passed by and she's like, I just wanted to give you this. And I was like, what? And she just thanked me for my book and my content. And I won't forget who she is, right? Because of that moment. And those kind of things I think are really, really meaningful, and it spreads from there. So I think that I just want to mention that it's not a social platform, but if you can meet your readers in real life, it has a lasting impact.
Hmm. Did anybody else want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I can attest to that, Julie. It's such a beautiful thing when you can connect with your readership. I remember doing a read along at a library, not to keep picking on libraries, but there was one kid who came up to me and she said, I understand that Septopus has 7 tentacles, but I'm waiting for her sister to show up who has 5. And it was just this beautiful moment of like creativity and curiosity combined. And it just, it made my day. It made my year. It was like, this is the reader. This is who's still curious at the end of the day. And plus, like, kids are just random and ridiculous in their own right. But still, knowing that you've made an impact or you've made somebody feel something based on the words that you've put on the page. That's what it's all about.
Definitely. Well, I think a lot of the people that we have here will be relieved to know that you don't have to do all the social media or even any social media at all. So I think that comes as welcome news to people. Absolutely. And so, in terms of quality, we're talking about the self-publishing space. Of course, people have different levels of investments that they can make into their book. And so, what are some of those quality markers that retailers, but then of course readers look for that separate a professional book from an amateur one?
So I think that for me, it's always been um, I don't know how to say this without sounding strange, but like for me, it's always about instinct. If I pick up a book and I'm like, this feels right. This feels comfortable. This feels like I could share this with a little one that I know, or, has something textured or something interactive that they can interact with. Is it something that like will leave a lasting, meaningful experience or lesson or theme that they can take away and pass around with their friends on the playground? Or, it really, like, for me, it's more intuitive, but it's also, you know, one really strange thing to bring up just on the whole is when I read a publication and I find a typo. And I think, oh, that makes me so sad, because if you work with a quality publishing house, they're going to take the time to check the typos, check the proofreading, check the formatting, check all those things. So then the writer really can just do what they need to do, which is writing the book. So really, like I say, it's more intuitive for me, but then again, like, it might be different for other people.
Definitely, I feel some indie authors underestimate the role of editing and even the layout and presentation, and it hurts them down the road when they're receiving reviews, and that's what people are commenting on. Any other thoughts on that topic, on the quality side of things and how it impacts book sales?
I think Stephanie touched on something that's really important, and it's that the reader doesn't know why a book is a good experience or not, and yet they will experience it. And
Mm.
so one of the things, is ebook, for example, or print book, how it will have touches that take them from the cover to the interior and it feels the same versus a templated interior that has just been spit out, automatically. It doesn't have that same feeling, and they won't know. They won't necessarily know unless it's a bad interior, but they won't necessarily know. But the experience of something that is really well designed is a different feeling for the reader. Now, librarians and bookstores, because you started off the question by going, what do retailers and librarians know? They're book lovers. So they will know if it's a good interior design or not. And so you have to be careful when you're using some of these tools that do make it cheaper and easier for you to design your own book. That experience can be an unconscious experience for some. And then for the professionals, if you're going that route, it will be a very conscious experience for them as to whether it's well designed or not.
Definitely. And so for authors who struggle with book promotion, and I know a lot of them do because they're so focused on the craft of writing and just telling a good story, it's such an art in of itself. By the time they get to book marketing, it's a whole different skill set. It's a whole different full-time job. Understandingly, it's underwhelming or overwhelming rather for a lot of authors. So how about some key takeaways or steps that people can take on the book marketing side of things to get the word out about the book if they're feeling like it's a very overwhelming and unfamiliar space?
Start local, to say that, like, if you're starting in a big city, it can feel very intimidating starting local and starting with the basics. For me, it was just putting together a spreadsheet and seeing if I could list all the public libraries that I knew. Could I list all the schools that I know? Do I know any not-for-profits that might benefit from Septipus's story? And then building up from there, doing the in-betweens. Is there an organization that might fit into a not-for-profit that I'm interested in, but might not know enough about the cause that we want to support? So, and in networking, I mean, I I can't emphasize it enough. You never know what you never know. So when you go into a situation and somebody interacts with you, this is a perfect chance to market and say, "Oh, hey, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on my next book. Oh, I just published my children's book." It should be a conversation starter. And also not being afraid to take the time to like create like a strategies. For me, I'm more of an introvert, so I tend to say, like, if I get 2 successful opportunities a month where I've either reached out and they've given me a response, that's a success. But for everybody, it's different. For some people who are more extroverted, it might be like, I need 10 leads a month to feel successful. So really, it's very subjective, but to not be afraid to like play to your strengths, play to your community, start local. Those are the best things to do just when starting out.
Definitely. Tim, did you want to get in on that one?
Sure. How about speaking? And speaking, you can think of if you were to do a little talk, or you can think of it as a Q&A format, which is to say a podcast. And the great thing about podcasts is there's big ones all the way down to little ones. So the key is starting where you're at. So how are you going to talk? What about your, and I know it's more relevant to nonfiction than fiction, but not necessarily. Look at Alyssa's book, right? It's on cranial, on a certain health issue. Actually, a lot of children's books have nonfiction themes to them. And in fact, I'm seeing it more common right now for people writing nonfiction books to also do a kid's book on the same topic. You get to read it over and over again, and the parents are reading it, the kids are learning it. Read one on free. So speaking, you might not think of yourself as a speaker, but give it a shot. And then you can translate speaking into doing interviews through podcasts or any other form of media. And as Julie mentioned, actually doing events. So think of any possible event that has audiences that overlap with yours, and see if there's a way to go to those events, speak, participate, maybe even sell your book in bulk as part of the package. So those would be a few. But again, starting small, starting with whatever skill set you have, and comparing where you are to where you were, and where you get to where you are, because you have to start somewhere and take those steps. And also just think of the value, think of what people pay for school and education. What a waste, right? You can learn this for free doing your book, promoting your book.
Definitely. So we'll go around to Alyssa and then Julie next to hear your thoughts on that. So your advice to authors, who are just starting out on the book marketing side of things, and you can add what's worked for you as well as a self-published author, Alyssa.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's worked most for me is going back to this idea again of connection. And connection is something that seems to come up overwhelmingly in the conversations that I have with our authors, with people within the publishing space, through the podcast. Once you have a connection with somebody established, they become your biggest supporter, your biggest cheerleader, your biggest form of advertising. And I think, I've had people post TikToks of them reading Kenny Gets Her Crown with their kids. And they read it, start to finish. That's the beauty of the kids' book. They can do that on TikTok in a reasonable amount of time. But that's now a piece of user-generated content that I didn't have to do, that is now cross-promoting between my audience and their audience, because, of course, I'm tagged within that post as well. So I think getting to the root of the people that want to root for you is connection, and hopping on, having Q&As. Not everybody's comfortable in front of the camera. And so doing something like a sit down and reading, or answering frequently asked questions, not on a live, but on a recorded video, really just kind of eases you into that situation and into that environment without putting yourself in a room full of people publicly, if that's not something that you feel comfortable with at the beginning. And then something that Stephanie had mentioned and made me smile, because I did the same thing, was sitting down and putting together a spreadsheet of all of the places that I thought had overlapping themes with the book, and beginning the outreach process that way. And again, building that connection, establishing that relationship is a really great way for people who are maybe more introverted or more uncomfortable getting out in those public environments to be able to sit and still do some of the groundwork.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Julie, let's hear from you next on the topic. And then we've got just 2 questions coming in, and we'll get to those next from the audience.
I think just try to do one thing every day. And, each day might be a little different depending on what's going on, but, do an outreach to a library one day, do a post the next day, write something for your newsletter. But doing one thing every day has a massive compounding effect, and also helps manage that overwhelm of, I have so many things I should be doing. So that would be my big recommendation. And I've had authors do that a year later, kind of, to Tim's point, they look back and they go, wow, like, look at everything I have done this year by just doing one thing a day. And they don't even do it 7 days a week. Most of them set the goal of one thing a day, 5 days a week. So,
Mhm. I
you know,
love
it's
that.
pretty phenomenal. Yeah. The other thing we haven't touched on, I just mentioned it briefly, is as a self-publishing author, understanding how Amazon's algorithm can work in your favor, I think is really important. And so, you know, making sure you have the metadata and it's up to date and checking on it, getting Amazon reviews. And, you know, once you have a few reviews, I highly recommend starting to run some ads,
Mhm.
because if you can teach Amazon who your customer is and who's going to convert, i.e., not your mom, not your best friend, but like the actual real ideal reader for your book, and you can send some traffic organically there and make sure Amazon knows what books you're like, you will sell books on Amazon. Not passively, because you have to stay on top of, you know, consistent things, but you know, that combined with this do something every day will generate momentum on Amazon. And it's really favorable if you can get Amazon to start showing your book in the also bots and in other places. It helps a lot.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for mentioning that. The categories and the metadata is so important in terms of how users search for things on Amazon. Lacey did kind of go into that, but yeah, it's definitely a really good reminder. Thank you for that. Okay, we've got a couple of questions if you have a couple of minutes, and then we'll wrap up here in a few minutes. Okay, so from Carol, we have what is the quality of the books like when you print them with Ingram Spark and Amazon? I read that covers on KDP are not great.
I think they're great, but it's not just there's some variation. Um, but I would just emphasize that the design on the cover is a big part of it. But overall, I think KDP nowadays, it used to be with color books, especially they had this sort of standard color, which wasn't as good. But I don't know, for a nonfiction book, I I find it pretty good. But a big part of what people consider a good quality cover comes from the quality of the design on the front. They do also random little screw ups where they'll like print the wrong book in the wrong cover. So when that's the first review you get or the fifth review you get, it's a little frustrating because that wasn't your fault. So that definitely happens. I forget we've had some awkward ones where they just screw up, but it's like 1 in 1,000. So feel free
Right.
to disagree if anyone.
Did anybody else want to add their thoughts to that?
I mean, for the trade-off, it's great. Like we've had the odd one where a whole box of covers is like slanted, and we've also had the same issue where the wrong book is inside of a cover. You know, which is always fun as the service provider because authors think it's our fault,
Mhm.
but it was some mess up on the printer side. But I mean, the trade-off I think is important to remember, because the trade-off is you don't have to get 5,000 books printed and store them in your garage or pay somebody to warehouse them while they get distributed. So the trade-off is every once in a while, it might not be the perfect quality that you would get if you did that 5,000, you know, offset print run kind of thing. So to me, the trade-off is that occasionally there are some issues, but I don't have to ever worry about storing the books or paying up front for all of those books. They're getting paid for as somebody else is buying them.
Mhm. And if you have a glossy art book or photography book, you know, yes, like KDP might not be, it's not going to give you the same quality, but there are those other trade-offs. So yeah, it's a good point to remember. Tim, were you going to say something?
No, that was what I was thinking. If I was just assuming the author was talking about a regular fiction or nonfiction
Mhm.
book, but if it's like a higher color, then that gets into other issues for sure, and you may need to consider
Mhm.
doing a print.
Definitely. Okay, so Sean is asking what returnable means. So we were kind of started off the conversation with that, and he was asking for a clear definition.
It means the bookstore can return the book to they bought the book and you get paid your royalties the moment that they bought your book, but they haven't sold your book. So then after 6 months, they say we never actually sold the book. So they decide to send it back to Ingram, and I forget what the options are. It used to be you could either like ship it back and pay a fee, and it was really high if it was crossing a border, or they destroy it. Um, So that's what returnable is. Anyone want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, never ever. So I checked the very first time I did this, I thought the box says return and destroy. So you're thinking of your book babies burning in an incinerator and it's horrifying, right? You want that because I didn't check that. I said return to author and I had a $1,200 bill. Now I had massive bookstore distribution at the time. So, relative to what I sold, the $1,200 bill wasn't that bad, but it was unexpected. But yes, you want return and destroy, even though you're probably going to picture your book babies burning, and that's exactly what happens to them.
Yeah, I think it's quite surprising for authors to realize, that's the books can still be returned in that large window. But that's why online book sales through KDP and print on demand and things like that, that's a whole different ballgame. That's why I think a lot of indie authors and self-published authors do push book sales, towards those channels rather than ones that are unfavorable to them. And that's kind of what you were hinting at, Julie, as well. I was like, is that even something, you really want to push? Is it in your favor, or are these other channels actually more to your advantage? All right. Well, we are at 5:23, running a couple minutes late, so we can just leave that here. Thank you, everyone. Huge thanks to the panelists for being here today and sharing your valuable insights. This is for most of you, your at least second chat, and for Alyssa and Tim, who've been here all day. Thank you again. We've covered a lot, from how to make your book professional to the strategies that actually drive sales, whether they are online or in bookstores. So I hope that everyone is walking away with practical steps and renewed confidence to get your book in front of more readers. So thanks to our speakers and thanks to all of our audience members for sticking around for the whole day. It's been incredible having your energy here. And we will see you back here tomorrow. This wraps up day 2 of the Empowered Author Summit. We're back at 9 a.m. Pacific time for day 3, and we're really focusing on book promotion strategies and other ways to profit from your book, aside from actually selling it. So I think that's going to be a lot of interest to you all. And Tim is back at 9 a.m. with your book as a business tool and 17 ways to create value beyond royalty. So we do have an incredible lineup of speakers. I hope to see you all back here tomorrow. Thanks again for being here with us today.